Laba diena. Hello world. Here I greet you all together in this wonderful experience that we are going to have all day long. It is an Audiovisual Heritage and its Potentials conference organized by the Ministry of Culture of Lithuania in partnership with Baltic Audiovisual Archive Council and the Martynas Mažvydas National Library of Lithuania. Here we are in National Library in one of open spaces, and we will be broadcasting this conference all day from here. My name is Lithuania. I will be your host today, and in commemoration of the UNESCO World Day of Audiovisual Heritage, we are going to be proud and rich of different experiences, knowledges from all over the world, I can proudly say. And here we are, in accordance to our partnerships and organization. I want to invite our distinguished guest to welcome us with a speech. I'm delighted to present you the Minister of Culture of the Republic of Lithuania, Mr. Mindaugas Kvietkauskas.
Dear speakers and participants of the conference, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to welcome you all today on the occasion of an international conference on audiovisual heritage, initiated by the Ministry of Culture of the Republic of Lithuania. Since 2005, the 27th of October is celebrated as the World Day for Audiovisual Heritage. In this way, UNESCO has decided to highlight the importance of audiovisual documents and the risks associated with their preservation. Audiovisual content plays an increasingly vital role in our lives. It permits to observe events we cannot attend, hear voices which cannot speak anymore, and remember what has perished in the past. In addition, audiovisual archives are valuable sources of collective memory, since they contain information about cultural, social, and linguistic diversity of different European communities. It is very important to preserve this heritage and ensure it remains accessible publicly and for future generations worldwide. However, it becomes a challenge for the memory institutions as this kind of heritage is extremely vulnerable. Public consciousness and global awareness in conserving audiovisual material is more than crucial. When it comes to Lithuania, I should stress that our country pays attention to its audiovisual heritage. The Ministry of Culture of the Republic of Lithuania takes care of it through close cooperation with the institutions that hold responsibility for audiovisual archives. In order to improve the field of audiovisual heritage, this year the Ministry of Culture has commissioned a study analysis of the Lithuanian audiovisual cultural heritage preservation and access system and recommendations for development. The results of the research will help to plan digital activities in the future. We also wait with great expectations for the start of the National Center of Excellence for the digitization of audiovisual heritage next year. What is more, the next year is proclaimed by the Parliament of Lithuania as the Year of Archives in Lithuania. I believe that a whole complex of activities will raise public awareness of this sensitive topic. The coronavirus pandemic has revealed the importance and necessity of audiovisual content. I would like to end up with a quote of a Mexican poet and former Director General of UNESCO, Jaime Torres Bodet, who once said that archives are not vast cemeteries, but places crucial to the continuity of human conscience. As a duty to future generations, this very specific and exceptional heritage, both fragile and technologically challenging, requires our special attention. I wish you all productive discussions and lots of new ideas for this important field. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear Minister, for a lovely welcoming opening speech, but it's not all. In accordance to our lovely partnership with the Baltic Audiovisual Archival Council, we have the president of this council, Mr. Juozas Markauskas, to give some more welcoming remarks to us before we go to all practical details about this conference later on.
Good morning again to everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this online conference. I believe that most of us are already used to this kind of virtual meeting and knowledge sharing space. And on one hand, this is the first time in more than 10 years that Baltic Audiovisual Archival Council members and colleagues don't have a chance to meet in Vilnius, Tallinn, Riga, Warsaw, or any other city in the region and take part in professional visits. But on the other hand, this is a great opportunity for us as a network of audiovisual curators and archivists to learn new ways of staying together and taking care of our sound and image heritage and continue serving our end user audiences with a little help from technology, of course. I would like to thank representatives of the Ministry of Culture of Republic of Lithuania and National Library of Lithuania for partnering in all arrangements of these events and being here today with us. Recognition of audiovisual heritage and its potential at the highest level is very important for our professionals, an expert who take care of project management, conservation, digitization, metadata creation, and other collection management activities in the daily workflow. It's easier to move ahead and reach your goals than someone really cares about what you are doing and provides a support. And this shouldn't be understood as a financial support only. It's more about the strategic planning and awareness raising, because that good ideas and initiatives are usually followed by the finances and not vice versa. In this conference, we will have a possibility to learn more about the recent study on the safeguarding and dissemination of audiovisual heritage in Lithuania and its results. This study is really high on the agenda since we are a little bit behind the schedule in audiovisual preservation compared to our neighboring countries, but I think it's never too late. I really appreciate that today we also have presenters from well-known institutions like Europeana, Wikimedia, audiovisual institutes in Netherlands and Poland, and they have a vast experience in sharing digitized cultural heritage objects online. This is a good expression I had before, like preservation for access. And especially in the times of lockdown, it's really, really important. So thank presenters for a valuable contribution. I invite all of you today to actively participate, share your thoughts and comments with our presenters. Don't be shy and use Q&A button on your Zoom. And of course, I wish you a good conference. So thank you very much for attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Juozas Markauskas, the president of the Baltic Audiovisual Archive Council, was here with us. And we are starting the first session right now. And I wanted to remind you, or just to bring you a little bit back to the introduction music that you have heard. It was actually a piece of audiovisual archives reused and disseminated as a new piece of art. The musical improvisation by Joshua Sabin, Sutarti, it is the title. It was produced with archival recordings, instrumentation, including skudučiai fiddle and field recordings of Lithuanian forest ambiences. The piece was made in 2019, and we are really thankful for this and other archival pieces that we are going to hear during our virtual coffee breaks, which were provided by Lithuanian National Radio and Television broadcasters. So this is the third partner of this conference, which is also big and potential stakeholder of the field. So here we go. Q&A is a very important part of this conference. Please all feel free to become a part creating this creating this conference's content by putting down your questions, whether in Lithuanian or in English language. If you are watching and participating with us from any other part of the world, your questions will be put here somewhere on my screen, and I will definitely put them in public at a certain moment. If you feel like you've missed something while one of our speakers were presenting or talking, please feel free to still put your question. It could be still answered by a speaker later on or here during the conference. So we will have 2 sessions here today. The first session on dissemination of audiovisual heritage will be presented by a really distinguished guest, and I think it's a great honor to create this future audiovisual content, I mean this conference recorded and broadcasted to you, together in alliance with 2 guests. One of them represents Europeana Foundation, which is an important platform created in Europe and made out of European archives content and for Europeans and wider. I think we will have this inspiration and more information about Europeana from Mr. Harry Verweyen, Executive Director of Europeana Foundation, in his presentation right next after my introduction. Culture shock, that's what we are going to experience. And also another distinguished guest, which I'm going to present later on. So let's start with those 2 keynote speakers here, starting from Mr. Harry Verweyen with a presentation titled Culture Shock. Hello, don't forget to put your questions online. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's my cue to start talking. Can you hear me all right? Yeah.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I'd like to especially thank the Minister of Culture, Mr. Kwiatkowski. I think it's a sign of trust and importance when the minister really comes and opens a conference like this. I think that's really fantastic. And also, of course, Juozas Markauskas, who I already know quite well. He was the highlight of our conference, I think, last year when we were still physically meeting and we were in Portugal. I think his work, his creative work on copyright is unparalleled. So during this presentation, I'd like to highlight a bit what we've learned during the pandemic, and I'm going to make a case that this is an important moment for us in our aspirations to become more digital, and I see a lot of opportunities there. So in preparing for this talk, I found this really interesting footage. You could consider this, I think, an early prototype of Zoom. This is from archival footage from the Institute of Sound and Vision of 1974. And as you can see, they already found ways not only to talk to each other with image, but even found ways to interact together using, of course, hardware technology at the time, but I thought this was really surprising. This is 36 years ago. Now, at the same time, things are going and moving incredibly fast. It's being calculated that by the end of this year, the world will have assembled 44 zettabytes of data. What is a zettabyte? That's a 1 with 15 zeros. I think it's way too much to comprehend. We don't understand the volume of that. But if I tell you that 90% of all that data was accumulated in the last 2 years alone, I think that tells you how incredibly fast we're now accumulating data. And I think the challenge we have is to figure out how we can make archival footage part of our collective digital data space. 80% of all the traffic on the internet is video, we know that, and we need to figure out what the role of audiovisual heritage is in that space. So I'm going to be taking you through three little stories from my own experience. I'm going to talk to you a little story about Adam Kozarski, and then I'll follow through with a number of things that we've learned during the pandemic in consulting our network. Now, I've put two links in this presentation that you can link to if you hold your phone in front of the QR codes that you will be seeing. So if you're interested, please have your phone ready. Let's have a look at the effects of this pandemic and maybe break it down a bit. I think most of us started experiencing the effects of the lockdowns somewhere around March, which we call the immediate crisis. And we had immediate reactions to it, also as a sector. And I'll talk you through some of those observations. I think we're now moving into a very fuzzy area, the transition period. It can still go all kinds of directions. And I think it's really up to us to figure out if we want to digitally transform, what do we want to transform into? Technology should not be leading us into the new normal, if we want to call it that way. So we've done some interesting work with the Europeana network. We have 3,000 members. Some of you are part of it. And we invited them around June to participate in peer-to-peer groups. And in those peer-to-peer groups, we worked with each other for 3 weeks. And it was really meant to understand, to make sense of how everyone was experiencing the lockdowns, what the effects were on their organization, and what their ambitions would be and how we could get there. And that was a very interesting exercise in itself. I think all of us are experiencing these things very differently. And it led to a report. And that report you can download. It's called Digital Transformation in the Times of COVID-19, Sense-Making Workshops, Findings and Outcomes. And it was written by Michael Peter Edson and Jasper Visser, two consultants we embarked on this journey with us. And I encourage you to download it, to read it, and to digest it. There's a lot of useful information in there. And with the Europeana network, we're now figuring out what our responses could be on those things. And I'll take you through them. So my first little anecdote is about this man, Adam Kozari. Adam Kozari is the social media manager at the Royal Academy of London, an art academy. And he was one of the first people to react to the pandemic on March 18. So that was really one day after the lockdown in the UK. He launched a Twitter campaign. And the Twitter campaign had a very simple question. Who can draw us the best ham? Believe it or not, that went viral immediately. People started drawing all kinds of creative versions of a ham. Here you see an Art Nouveau style ham. As you can see, it had close to 7,000 likes on Twitter. And we saw exploding the Twitter account of the Royal Academy. Some very nifty little watercolor miniatures. We've also seen some cartoons. Here you see a person in the form of a ham slouched over his laptop in a lockdown working from home environment. So there was a sense of humor in it as well. So when interviewed, Adam Kozari told the New York Times, so what was the driver for the Academy to do this type of work? And he said, well, our first reaction really was people seem to want some light relief from the news. These are dark times and we wanted to do something lighthearted. And that really worked. So I think one of the things we could ask ourselves as a sector, knowing that we now see the Twitter account of the Royal Academy, it tripled its followers to 500,000. So that for most cultural institutions is very out of reach. So we should ask ourselves, do we think this is a great example of success of digital transformation? And I'm encouraging you to think about that. You might think, yes, this is really interesting. This is something that I wish my institution would have done as successfully. And I think rightfully so. I think Adam Kozari is a brilliant social media strategist, and he really understood what the zeitgeist was very quickly. Equally, you could also argue that using the Twitter platform for a cultural institution may not have been the best way to reach their audiences. As we also know, Twitter, Facebook, and so forth also lock us into their algorithms, which are biased, which lead us into tunnels. Is this how you want to present yourself as a cultural organization? Should you not find other ways to reach your audiences? I will not claim that I have the answer for this. At Europeana, we use all these platforms. We also try to provide alternatives for them. I think what we've seen in the early days of the pandemic, and this is from a report from NEMO, the European Museums Associations, we've seen a very fast increase in online activity. They claim 60% of the museums in Europe dramatically increased their online activities between March and the end of June. So that is a sign that our reflexes are good. We know that we need to change when adversity hits us. But I think we're also establishing, and this is what we found in our reports, an increasingly wide digital divide in Europe. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. In those early days, while we saw a lot of online activity, cultural activity, when you scratched under the surface, we also found that most of that activity was either very large, well-equipped, digitally minded organizations such as the Rijksmuseum, the Institute of Sound and Vision, and so forth. Which is fine, but it means that there was a lot of silence from a lot of other organizations. And we need to be concerned about that because we don't want that digital transformation to narrow the view on what we all have in stores. The digital divide spans between countries in Europe. Some countries are much more advanced than others. I think the Baltic states are always a highlight of well-advanced organizations in digital countries, but that's certainly not the case across Europe. We saw the digital divide also between institutions in countries, just giving you some examples, but also, and I think maybe that's the most concerning part, we've seen a lot of organizations being dependent on one or two, and very often those would be freelance people who understand digital, while the rest of the organization was still very much in the traditional mold of doing the things that they did in the analog world. So when other institutions went online, very often it was just adding, just putting all the images that they digitized and put them online somewhere in the hope that something would happen. And I don't think that's the solution for us. In particular for you in the audiovisual sector, I think a big topic of discussion in the coming years will be the platforms. YouTube, as we know, about a third of the whole world population is using it. On the other hand, we've seen that it cannot be the solution for all of our outreach activities. I'll just leave it at that for a moment. So that was about digital divides that we think are widening rather than narrowing. And what can we do about that? My second example will be more about the capacity that we have as individuals to direct change in our organizations. And I want to tell that story through this man, which is Sir John Williams. He's a famous person in Wales. He was the head surgeon of the royal family in the mid-19th century, accumulated a lot of wealth in that context, but has been pivotal in the development of the National Library, which is in Aberystwyth on the coast of Wales. Little side note, because I think it's always nice when you dig into these things. I found this on Wikipedia, by the way. John Williams is also associated with the Whitechapel murders, which are better known as the Jack the Ripper murders. So one of his tools, a blunted knife, was found with some of the victims, and that mystery has never been solved. But I'm sidetracked here. That's not the point of my story. The point of my story is that he's been important in setting up the National Library of Wales. He's donated 25,000 manuscripts in the late 19th century, and that was the beginning of a very important cultural organization in Wales. Now, this image of him is an oil on canvas. It hangs on the walls of the National Library. It's about 1 meter by 120. It has been digitized in the early 2000s on a pretty reasonable resolution, 2000 by 3000 pixels. That's enough to fill your screen nicely if you're giving a presentation. The important bit is that the people in Aberystwyth were very forward-thinking. They were very quick to also adopt the right licenses for this. So this was under an open license, if I think now in the public domain, which allowed it to get to Wikimedia. It also had a triple IF manifest in the past couple of years. So it's had a life on the web, and it was present there and therefore reached new audiences. One of the people it reached was this lady, Erika Inzitari. And Erika Inzitari is a designer from Italy. She came across this image of Sir John Williams in a contest of her university, and she participated in the Europeana GIF It Up competition, creating GIFs out of images. And what you see here is her using a tool called Spine Mesh, where you can really dissect the anatomy of an image and therefore create interesting new things. And I think I'm mesmerized still when I see how much alive still images can become using this kind of technology. So here we see Sir John Williams as a GIF. She did not win the competition. She's got an honorable mention. But it shows how digital can really transform not only images, but also how people in organizations like the National Library of Wales are equipped to make material available on the web and stay relevant in their communities. We've done a lot of that with Europeana. We've accumulated 50 million items from all sides of Europe, from all domains of Europe. 1% of that is audiovisual. It is one of the more popular things on Europeana, and of course, it also struggles a lot with copyright issues, which prevents us from doing a lot more than we want to with it. Nevertheless, about half the material on Europeana doesn't have any restrictions to it. 75% has some restrictions, but we try to make this as openly available as possible. That's not the end of the story. Sir John Williams is nodding to us. We know that a lot of people in our organizations do not feel well equipped to make these kind of transitions in their organization. Not only that, we also feel that we're not reaching out to parts of society, minority voices that we also feel should be included in the stories that we tell about cultural heritage in Europe. So here we see a recent exhibition on Amy Wang, who was a person from Asian descent who had a huge impact on the cultural scene in the 1920s. We see a capacity gap. I think that's the important bit. During the pandemic, lots of people started to do things online. We know that most of those people did not have any background in digital, were not equipped and didn't feel equipped to be able to make that transition. So that's one of the big things that we need to start sorting out when we think about the acceleration of digital transformation in our sector. So we labeled this as agency for change. The people in our sector do not always feel they have the agency, the rights, the capabilities to make change in their organization, while they have a strong desire to do it. And this is something that we should all worry about. Finally, I want to talk about the power of collaborations and the power of creating opportunities for people to participate in cultural heritage. And I want to do that by telling you a little story about this lady, Elżbieta Żobia. She is a lady I met in Poznan in Poland 2 years ago. And she was participating in one of our 1914-1918 collection days. We collected material on the First World War from people. We didn't want to only tell the institutional story, we wanted to tell the story through the eyes of the descendants of the people who lived through that horrific episode in our history. So she brought to us images and letters and postcards from her grandfather, Bronislaw Zobia. You see him here. I'm always a bit endeared when I see this image. This was in December 1918. He just came back from Verdun, where he was injured. And you see him here in a suit, which is obviously too big, not feeling very comfortable in this situation. So we invited her to tell her story. And she did, and you see here one of the examples of how we do this. We really set up places in libraries where we invite people to come. They share their stories. We record the data. Sometimes we even record their voice and create videos of it. And as you can see, it's very often, it's a very moving story. These have been stories in family histories which were very close to the people who lived through it. Her father died in 1976 when she was still young, but she can tell a part of the story, the human side of the story, that you wouldn't find in the history books. So we, over the years, had 10,000 people participating in this. We collected about 200,000 items, which are available on Europeana. What I think it tells us is that as cultural institutions, we really have the power and the infrastructures. I think that's the most important bit. We reach so many people if we want to stay incredibly relevant to the agenda that is unfolding right now, especially now during the pandemic in Europe. And I always say to people in our sector that we shouldn't be so shy. Again and again, even in my country, the Netherlands, we see that our sector is just not as confident as other sectors in showing what we're worth. And I think it's important to make that case right now when the new multi-annual frameworks for Europe are being decided upon for the next 6-7 years. So I'm going to just repeat what I say every time when I do a presentation. So our sector, that's the cultural and creative industry together, contribute 4% to the gross domestic product of Europe. And I'm not sure how that pans out in Lithuania, but my guess would be that the percentage would be even larger because you're a very creative country and you already adopted digital quite well. We're one of the growth sectors in Europe. If we think about economic development, our sector is something to be recognized. And we should be recognized also because we employ 9 million people, and that's more than the people working in, for example, the chemistry industry or the automotive industry, very 19th century industries. Our industry is really one of the 21st century. And a nice little side note, we employ more young professionals, people between 18 and 26, than any other industry in Europe. So besides all the impact we already have on identity and social cohesion and so forth, we are a force to be recognized with, and that should translate into instruments on a European scale. So in order to do that, my plea to you would be, we need to collaborate and collaborate even more. We need to think of our sector as one of our participants put, one big company. And I don't want to make us a commercial company at all, but I think the power is really in the network, in the way how we become more efficient in sharing knowledge, in sharing technologies and infrastructures, and also how we band together when we need to advocate for the importance of what we do. So we do that with the Europeana Foundation and the Europeana Network Associations, and the aggregators form the 3 pillars of the European Europeana initiative. And a key aspect of that are the partners we have on a national and an international scale. So I wanted to just mention and thank the national aggregator in Lithuania. I think it's really important to have local people who talk the language quite literally and work with us to create more digital material. Equally, and you'll hear more later on, we have domain-specific partners. EU Screen is the one for audiovisual material, which can help with very much the specifics of audiovisual material. So I'd like to leave you with this. I think we have a choice at the moment, and we need to think deeply how we exercise the right to have that choice. We need to figure out what we want to transform into before we're being transformed. I want to leave you with a very last little note. There's some really interesting new developments in how we use technology in our sector. I think our sector is one of the most advanced, the audiovisual sector in the world. Here you see a very short clip from something that you'll see at the Europeana conference next week, if you attend that. The National Film Archive in Australia has done something absolutely spectacular. They were the first one to preserve audiovisual material on DNA. And if that is the future that is already within reach, then I think a lot of things will be possible for us. So I'd like to thank you for your attention. I'll do a little bit of self-promotion here. We have our conference next week, 11th to the 13th of November, where we will be touching upon the subjects I mentioned, the digital divide, the creation of agency for change, and collaborations in much more depth. So I'll be happy now to take some questions or remarks from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for such an inspiration. It's good that we have had breakfast recently since this lovely story about ham, and now I can see the links between the DNA and ham and everything you've said. That was really, really nice. My question comes from actually personal work field. I didn't present myself as running Creative Europe desk here in Vilnius, which is a kind of direct dissemination partner of Europeana. And I was following the content and the work you do for past several years. I have noticed that there was some kind of shift in the activities of Europeana itself, in the way you present your content, in the way you create your kind of marketing. What was the break-even point? I wanted to ask you. Was that some persons? Was that some kind of partnership environment or some funding things? Because there was a really distinctive difference between what do I have remember kind of just a archival platform several years ago, and right now where you have these ham things which are really adorable and lovely.
Yeah, thank you, and I'm glad you noticed that. That was indeed a shift we initiated, well, I think close to 2 years ago. We completely revamped our website, complete new technology stack, and it was much more geared now on engaging people and letting them browse. I think in previous versions, search was the most important thing. And we found out that search with the type of material that we have only works if you're very specifically looking for something. And we wanted to create more narratives and more stories that engage people more deeply into our content. So there are two things there. One was a technology-driven one. We're working now on the basis of entities. So these are the engine that drive the browsability on our website. Entities being, this is a painting, or if you're interested in black and white photography, then here's more black and white photography, and so forth. Now, there's a little danger here. You heard me say that I'm very conscious that the big commercial platforms that we're working with do exactly that and do that much better. They are specializing in addiction. They understand the neurological processes of moving, of not letting you leave the site. And that's not what we're after. We're after how can we engage you and show you the diversity of the content that we have in Europe without locking you into one specific area. So that's one. And secondly, I would just say I've got a brilliant team of people in the editorial department, and we work closely with all the institutions we work with. And they create really nice new narratives that are in tune with what's going on in the world right now. So you've seen us doing things on face masks. We've had galleries on Zoom backgrounds. We are now doing a lot more on diversity and inclusion stories about people with a different ethnic background in Europe. So I think those two things combined have led to some success, and I'm really glad that you recognize that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the answer. And I have another question. It might be a little bit provocative. Which is the more or the most important driver, speaking in this field, audiovisual archives or audiovisual heritage field, or generally archives? Is this the preservation, decent metadata accuracy, or this dissemination and marketing thing? Which is the bigger driver, or do they drive each other, or they are separated things? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm hesitant to do an either-or on this one. I think all these things need to be balanced out. So let me explain that. On the one hand, I say, and you heard me make that case, video is one of the most important drivers for digital at the moment worldwide. 80% of the traffic is video. And if we want to stay relevant as audiovisual archives, we need to make sure that our collective memory is part of that, right? So that would gear us towards let's put all the audiovisual material we can on big commercial platforms, because that's where you have the biggest outreach. On the other hand, I think we need to think deeply about what our unique value proposition is in this world. And here I would really err on the side of caution. I think this is a world where deep fakes will become prevalent in the next 5 to 10 years. Everyone will have technology at their disposal to make deep fake videos, for example. And I think we could see it as one of our tasks to make sure that the historical material is not presented as alternative facts, as we've now seen happening in the American elections. So I would say if we need to invest somewhere, we need to invest in the area where we have a unique value propositions. We are about accuracy, we're about traceability, we are about presenting the facts as they were so that they are open for interpretation for others. That doesn't exclude, I think, that we work with commercial platforms, but I think we should always make sure that we have platforms of our own, which are more vested in the DNA of our value systems, if you want. So we should definitely make sure that we work with organizations like Wikimedia, hopefully with Europeana. Public infrastructure is going to become increasingly important, in my opinion.
Thank you. And the last question is, do you have your personal favorite search filter or keywords on Europeana search engine?
No, I don't. I really try not to do these things because I want to keep open for new things that come around. Maybe one little thing I can mention is that by the end of the year, you'll be able to also log in on Europeana and have your own personal account, which will allow you to create your own favorite galleries. So you will be allowed to like things and create them in galleries and even make them public. So I'll be curious to see if, what I'll add to my own personal galleries there.
Thank you for being such a diplomatic guest at our conference. And this was Harry Verwey, the Executive Director of Europeana Foundation, and some questions. If you feel like you want to type something really, really quickly for Mr. Harry, please do that right now, or we could go on. No, I don't see questions. I don't see more questions. So thank you. Thank you very much for joining us here. Please stay on during the day. Perhaps we could share some more thoughts or hear some interesting cases as well for you, as well as you have given to us. Thank you. And our second guest, our second keynote speaker, comes from a kind of similar but very different platform of dissemination of audiovisual heritage. It is Wikimedia. Wikimedia might be known and used very well for all of the world, but here we have the department in Sweden and the executive director John Anderson, who is going to talk to us and present his presentation about value of audiovisual heritage. What value would audiovisual heritage on Wikimedia platform bring? So we had some words coming from Harry Verwijn about value proposals that might be provided or given from such platforms, and what does the Wikimedia do? John Anderson, please, you are very welcome.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, we do.
Great. Thank you so much for having me here today. I thank you for this opportunity to talk a little bit about the value that audiovisual heritage could bring to the Wikimedia platforms. My name is John Andersson, and I'm the Executive Director at Wikimedia Sweden, and we are the Swedish branch of the global Wikimedia movement. And I lead a NGO that's supporting free knowledge in the wide sense. But most people haven't heard about Wikimedia, but nearly everybody has heard about some of the projects we run. And the most well-known of these projects is Wikipedia. And over the years, the Wikimedia movement has worked with many cultural heritage institutions. And we have a tech team that is working steadily on growing and supporting our partners to share their content to the world on the Wikimedia platforms. We have supported and worked with many museums, archives, and libraries to share the materials on the Wikimedia platform for many years. And in the coming years, we are planning to significantly expand our work in this area. I want to share my screen here as well, so you can see. Wikimedia is not really, we're not a company, but we are a charity. We have a foundation, Wikimedia Foundation, which is the one that runs all the servers and handles most of the technical development and the collection of funding for the website. But across the world, there is this kind of a diverse set of organizations, NGOs, that are working to supporting the volunteer communities, that are working to organize partnerships, that are working to do research, to build tools, and to engage the general public and explain how Wikipedia works and other platforms that we are working on. And Wikimedia Sweden, we are one of those organizations, and we have specialized in partnerships with cultural heritage institutions. So in today's presentation, I would like to share with you some specific examples on how audiovisual heritage can be shared with the world through the Wikimedia platforms. And I will try to highlight 3 of the key platforms that we're running, Wikipedia, obviously, but also Wikidata, which is a platform for structured data, and Wikimedia Commons, which are a media repository. And I will try to show the potential of working with the Wikimedia platforms. And these potential obviously includes impacts and views and reach of the content. But I also think it's worth highlighting that by working, utilizing the Wikimedia platforms, there's kind of this unexpected part to it that is still kind of unexplored to many. And that is the potential of using the Wikidata to structure, connecting, and linking the content and the metadata that you have. And therefore making it more available and making it available in multiple languages at once. I will also try to share what a cultural heritage institution needs to think about if they want to share the content on the material on Wikimedia Commons and on Wikidata. So, and in my presentation here, just to make it more concrete, I will give some examples from the Netherlands Institute of Sound and Vision, as this is kind of the audiovisual archive that I think has worked most deeply with Wikimedia movement. And Johan Åman, which is the head of research of Sound Vision. He will be part of the panel later during the conference, so I think tune in for that. I think that will be very interesting. And since the host of this conference is Lithuania, obviously I will use some of the Lithuanian language examples in the presentations. But obviously, if there's viewers from other parts of the world, you can easily find similar examples from your countries. So many of you, of course, know about Wikipedia. Wikipedia is the free online encyclopedia, and it's nowadays one of the world's most visited websites. We have around 1 billion people that every month search for information on Wikipedia. And they are very active on Wikipedia. These 1 billion people, they read around 17 billion articles. So there's a lot of knowledge that's being consumed. And the content and the editorial process, they are all driven by the volunteers on Wikipedia. All the work is transparent and it takes place completely open. And Wikipedia's vision is very bold. It's imagine a world in which every single person on the planet is giving free access to the sum of all human knowledge. That's what we're doing. This grand goal is what motivates and drives the Wikimedia movement forward. But the knowledge project, Wikipedia, it's never finished. We always look for new opportunities to partner with different organizations because even the logo showcases this. The logo is missing pieces of the puzzle. And I see this missing piece as an invitation, that there is a place for you to be part of something bigger and help fill these gaps and to raise the quality of the Wikipedia platforms and to reduce distortions. So as I said, Wikipedia has become one of the world's most visited websites. For a long time, we held the position as number 5 in the world. We have dropped down to number 10 now because there has been a number of large Chinese websites that have been growing very fast. But for example, here in Lithuania, we have Wikipedia being more actively used than Facebook, for example. And what is really cool with Wikipedia is that it is a unique and groundbreaking way of compiling information about the world. So the organizations, such as Wikimedia Sweden and all the volunteers across the world, the hundreds of thousands, millions of volunteers across the world that contribute to the platforms, we all try to bring together published expert knowledge from across the world. Not create new knowledge, but bring together what is already out there, to compile it, to make it understandable, to connect it, and to repack it in a way so we can share it with the world in hundreds of languages. And these articles that we are working, they are filled with references where you can read more fact-checked information. And this is a key piece of the whole thing, that it should be possible for anyone that reads a Wikipedia article to really see where the information is coming from and then evaluate it, use source criticism and think, is this information what I need and up to scratch? And a lot of people, they really didn't think that this kind of volunteer-based approach would work. But it's very interesting because there's been study after study both from journalists, but also from academia that shows that Wikipedia in different languages are often better, or at least equivalent to traditional encyclopedias. And this is despite the fact, as I said, that the work on Wikipedia is done by the volunteer writers. We invite and engage a lot of experts, thousands and thousands of experts to contribute, but they're doing it either as part of their day-to-day job or as volunteers. And it's the community themselves that come together and determines what should be on Wikipedia. The common rules that exist on Wikipedia, they are for the community to be able to function and work in the same direction. So that Wikipedia is free and available, it doesn't mean that it's free from frameworks or regulations. There are also other Wikimedia services on the platforms that I think is very interesting to talk about. I will focusing today on 2 of them that I think are very relevant for the archival sector. It's the Wikimedia Commons, which is a crowdsourced free media library. It contains more than 65 million media files of all kinds at this point. We're talking images, video, text, sound files, and since a few years, also 3D files. And all of these media files, they are free to openly use and reuse. And when you write a Wikipedia article, you can only really add media effectively from the Wikimedia Commons to them. And many libraries and archives and museums, they have decided over the years to share their content through Wikimedia Commons. So we are working with them to upload these media files that they have digitized onto the platform. We support them with that process. And then that material that can be easily reused in Wikipedia articles. And I will show you some examples today of files have been donated by the Netherlands Institute of Sound and Vision. The other thing I would like to talk about is the platform Wikidata. It's a free and open knowledge base that can be read and edited by both humans and machines. And many members of the Wikidata community, as we call them, they upload metadata that are sourced from libraries, from archives, and museum collections. And one very interesting example of this has been what we call this, is named the sum of all paintings. So there you have the Wikidata volunteers. They work on collecting information about paintings from in the cultural heritage institutions. They upload the metadata. And they use that as some source from aggregators like Europeana as well, to bring as much information about the world's paintings as possible onto Wikidata. And it's been very, very successful. And I'm thinking this isn't a good example that might be possible to reuse in the area of audiovisual, or organizing a project called the Sum of All Films, for example. That might be of interest for you guys. So what is really important here is that when libraries and archives and museums work together with members of the Wikimedia community, this is something we've been working on for quite some time. We actually have a name for it. We call it the GlamWiki collaborations. And a GlamWiki initiative, that is, when you have a collaboration between galleries, libraries, archives, and museums, that's the GLAM part, with Wikipedia. And in such a kind of institutionalized way, we work with the cultural institutions to share their resources and knowledge with the world through the collaboration with Wikimedians. I would say that this is really, Wikipedia and the Wikimedia platforms has become a kind of unparalleled opportunity for the custodians of cultural heritage to present their cultural heritage to a new audience. And this was spearheaded by the British Museums back in 2010, so this has been going on for 10 years now. There was a Wikimedia volunteer called Liam White from Australia who reached out to the British Museum and discussed if they could start sharing their content on the Wikimedia platforms. And it's been expanding ever since. We have had dozens and dozens of GlamWiki collaborations, and really, like, they share the idea that cultural heritage institutions want to share the material on the Wikimedia platform, but they are really quite different of them. They can focus on either having their expert, for example, contributing to editing Wikipedia articles and improving the content about the topics that they have in their collections, for example, or it can be that we work with them to batch upload audio files or video files or images or things like that, or that they are working on Wikidata to kind of connect the databases that they have and they share their information through the Wikidata platform. So far, I would say audiovisual content is very heavily underrepresented in our platforms, and this is very often due to copyright reasons. And that is why I think I'm very happy that I got this invitation to be part of this conference, because I would really love to see more GlamWiki collaborations with audiovisual archives. And I think there's so much to do there. And just to trigger your imagination a little bit, what do you think that this number represents? This is the number of times that Wikipedia articles in which there are media files from the Netherlands Institute of Sound and Vision, the amount of times that they have been viewed since July 2014. So this includes both video files, sound recordings, and photographs. So 1,244,000,000 times they've been viewed. So this is a number that far exceeds the number of times that these files would be accessed via Sound and Vision's own website, plus it's present on the EU Screen Europeana. There's just a massive amount of people that are visiting the Wikipedia articles. This is on the English language Wikipedia. There's a video file from the Netherlands Institute of Sound and Vision in this very article about Josephine Baker. The video shows Josephine Baker coming to Hague with a train, and this video that is in the article has been shown 119,000 times just in September alone. This is the most visited Wikipedia article with a file from Sound and Vision in September. And this video was actually played a full 104,000 times. So the article was read 119,000 and the video was viewed nearly every time. And unlike some platforms where they kind of automatically start, you actively have to click on it and activate it. That is, I should say, clarify, that's not just on the English Wikipedia, that is across all the languages. So it's already also accessible in some other languages. So you see this really represents a massive number of plays and audiences when you share your content on the Wikimedia platforms. But obviously, like, this is the best example. Josephine Baker here, very famous person, very many views on Wikipedia. There are, of course, not all Wikipedia language versions are as big as English Wikipedia. Not all of them are as viewed as Josephine Baker. So I want to take a Lithuanian example as well. This is a video file about the Black Cruise. This article was viewed 192 times in September 2020. It's the most visited Lithuanian Wikipedia article with a file from Sound and Vision in September. In total, though, even though it's 192 times, it's not nothing, but it's not huge compared to Josephine Baker. But the video file was viewed very often. Still reached around 5,000 times that this video was viewed just in September alone. So even with these more peripheral topics, you get a huge amount of views and audience that actually consume the material that you share. So you might think then, okay, well, how if we're in a cultural heritage institution, we are interested in sharing our material, how do we go about doing that? How do we publish files on Wikimedia? What are the requirements? And well, basically, what you need to do is that the files that you upload on Wikimedia Commons, and from there include on Wikipedia and Wikidata, that these files, they must be free of copyright. So that means that they are in public domain, or that you must have the right to upload it since you own the copyright yourself, I mean, that you are the creator of the file, or that the person or organization that holds the copyright have used a standard license that counts as open. So, and when I say open, I'm talking about material that can be freely studied, that can be freely applied, copied, and or modified by anyone for any purpose, including commercial. And it's worth noting that when you share material on our platform, on Wikimedia, the Wikimedia platforms, we do not own the things that you share. We don't take any ownership of it. Wikimedia Commons is not limited to be the only tool in your toolbox. So an audiovisual archive is, of course, free to publish their content on other platforms as well. So the Wikimedia community, we claim no copyright, no exclusivity, and we really push for that it should be a multi-channel publication strategy is a good way to go if you want to maximize an audience reach. I mean, you might want to publish your archival material on EU Screen Europeana, on Wikipedia, on Vimeo, YouTube, Dailymotion, and so on, because to a large extent, the users do not completely overlap, or they come to the platforms for different purposes, so they will find different value in what you've shared there. And the type of content you really can share on the platforms, it has to be for it to be a free license that is public domain. The copyright protection in Europe is life plus 70 years. So if it's older than that, we are very happy to work with you to upload that. Also, if you have taken consider a faithful 2D digitization of public domain works, we do not consider that to be new copyright. In this way, we're in alignment with Europeana's public domain charter. So if you want to share that kind of material, we're very happy to host that as well. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that since the servers for Wikimedia Commons and the Wikimedia Foundation are based in the US, our policy is if you want to upload a file, it must be no legal hindrance to do so, neither under US law nor of the law of the country of origin. And if you want to share your metadata, for example, as I said, the sum of all films, you just want to have information about Lithuanians, all directors, for example, or actors to be shared on the platforms, well, then that material must be under a Creative Commons 0 license. That the data must be, there can be no limitation how to reuse it at all. All of the data on Wikidata is under CC0 license. It is to make it as easy as possible for anyone that has an interest of creating a service, reusing it, making the material more findable to any platform. They should be able to do so as easily as possible. And it's also important that when talking about audiovisual content, that the file format itself has to be open. So that means that it has to be patent-free. It has to be technically supported by Wikimedia Commons, and the files need to be converted to such formats prior to upload. So there might be some discussion needed to have with the Wikimedia community or one of the Wikimedia organizations that we can support you on figuring that out. There is also, of course, if you just Google it, you will be able to find information, to find the pages are relevant. And I think there is not there is a good example already here from Lithuania. The Lithuanian Public Service TV has published 729 TV clips on EU Screen Europeana, and they marked them as public domain. And this is material that might be of interest to kind of initiate a first GlamWiki content partnership in Lithuania. These clips could be added to the Lithuanian language Wikipedia, for example. And it might be an interesting idea for a possible pilot project to look into. Okay, so we talked about Wikipedia and we talked about Wikimedia Commons, and now I would like to go a bit more technical about the opportunities that Wikidata presents. So in support of Wikipedia, we have started our own database of facts, which is called Wikidata. And Wikidata holds facts on over 90 million subjects. So it's a huge collection of information. It's growing extremely quickly. We have tens of millions of new subjects added in the past year alone. And what I would like to do now is give you a little bit of some quite brief but concrete examples on how Wikidata can be used to improve the discoverability of institutional content, both on Wikipedia, but also on Google and on institutions' own sites. So Wikidata is really all about the facts, and it's built in a way that both humans and machines can easily use the information. It contains information that is not shown on Wikipedia, so it's much more information available on Wikidata that is on Wikipedia. But Wikipedia uses the information from Wikidata to, for example, make it possible to update information in one place. So you have information about someone passing away, for example. You can automatically update that. You can update that on Wikidata, and it's automatically updated in other parts of the Wikimedia universe. And an interesting aspect of this, because Wikidata is under a CC0 license and it's very standardized, it's easy for computers to read from it. A lot of these very large internet platforms are using it. So we are kind of like part of the infrastructure for the internet nowadays. So Google, Alexa, Siri, for example, they all use Wikidata under the hood, so to say. And the information that they provide when you do a search often comes from Wikidata. So they have found ways of extracting the information that we have collected from Wikidata and to make searches better. Wikidata is very closely connected and interlinked with Wikipedia. And so this ensures that information is easier to keep updated across our language versions. So it can have a very large impact on sharing the material on Wikidata. And by using the Wikimedia platforms, and especially Wikidata and structured data on Wikimedia Commons, you can help to improve the multilingual discoverability of institutional content. So just to give an example of how Wikidata can really help you to reach a larger audience with the content you have. If you share information about, for example, all of the Lithuania's directors, movie directors, and even if we don't have Wikipedia articles about it, we have a very easy way then to identify those. So volunteers can identify, here's a list of people that we have on Wikidata that are relevant, they've done important things, but we don't have Wikipedia articles. That's a great way of engaging the volunteer community to create articles about those people that we are missing online. So another new development we had in the last couple of years is structured data on Commons. So as Wikimedia Commons is a media database, we are working very heavily there to get the information. We have had a lot of free text information available on Wikimedia Commons over the years, but we want to make it really easy for computers to really extract information. So media files on Wikimedia Commons, they can be cataloged with multilingual captions and concepts. For example, with the recorded species object in Wikidata. So it makes it possible to make files discoverable regardless of what language users are searching on, both on Wikimedia Commons, but also on Google, because they index Wikimedia Commons and use that as a underlying structure for their searches. For example, in this slide here, I have the information about a movie, which is uploaded on Wikimedia Commons from Sound and Vision. And underneath the image, you can see that there is, you can help as a volunteer by adding the name of the bird in your language. And by doing so, you make it possible to search for it regardless of language. And this specific video is being used, used across the Wikimedia, different Wikipedia versions, also in the Lithuanian article about the woodwarbler. So really, by connecting this type of information, this structured data, to these files on Commons, we can make it searchable. It's more easy for volunteers to add them to Wikidata articles. They get even further reach and more visibility. And you can, of course, do a lot of interesting research on it as well, when you have it more easily accessible like that. That leads me to the second part, that Wikidata can really be used as a data hub. So if you connect a term in a vocabulary or an entry in an authority to the corresponding Wikidata object, they will also be connected to the term or record in the other vocabularies, so that that the Wikidata is also connected to. You can use what is external equivalent links or same as links. That's in that way you can tell that this object in Wikidata is the same as this object in this other database, and by doing so in another vocabulary, for example, or an authority as well. And by doing so, you can do cross searches. So, for example, for films, this can be used to connect the different films. It can be and the persons that are involved in them. So, example, if Internet Movie Database has a dedicated page about an actor, Tom Hanks, for example, and Wikidata has a unique identifier for Tom Hanks, we can connect those two. And then, if you do a search on Wikidata, you can find information on Internet Movie Database and via, for example, and pull out all the information. This has been, actively used by the Library of Congress. They have actively built a solution where when they create a new subject heading, it's also cross-referenced with Wikidata, just to make it a more smooth process of making sure they can always ensure that their content is as findable as possible. And over the years now, Wikidata has developed hundreds of external identifiers from external sources that it can be connected to, and which increase, of course, searchability. So by using Wikidata as a hub in this way, it opened up for cases where Wikidata can act as a kind of an invisible data exchange between different vocabularies and authorities. And this can help, I think, really making your own vocabulary be more multilingual. You can match terms with those of Wikidata and then fetch the labels that Wikidata has for those terms in language that you don't yourself have in your vocabulary. So with objects in Wikidata, that's objects that represent people, places, persons, and so on. They can be highly multilingual and interlinked with formal vocabularies and authorities that make for excellent control tags. So as an institution, you can, on your side, use these tags you can use Wikidata to bridge differences in languages and make your archives and collections more discoverable across languages. You could use the tagging internally. You can add translations to your to more languages by using Wikidata terminology as tags to have the content you have available translated into multiple languages. Wikidata, as I said, because you can search across different data sets, and that we have a very strong search engine for this, the Wikidata query service. You can use Sparkle to allow users to create really complex queries and export or visualize the results of the query. So here in the screenshot, you have a slide. We show the narrative locations. That is where the story of the film takes place, of the films that are available in Wikidata that has this specific piece of data. And as you may be able to tell, the narrative location where the story takes place has not been cataloged for all film objects in Wikidata, and we're missing many films. We have this. I think maybe it shouldn't be described as a problem, but what we have seen is that we worked heavily with including, for example, Internet Movie Database, and that has led that we have a very skewed amount of results towards the US and Western Europe and the film productions that happen there. So being able to really work actively to import database of actors, directors, producers from other geographical areas would be really, really valuable and help to make this, more correctly represent the world. We are also working on being able to have this kind of advanced search functionality in the structured data on Commons and Wikimedia Commons. which is currently in beta, but it's going to be launched quite soon. So I would really like to say that the readers of Wikipedia, they represent a massive audience for who you cannot otherwise reach. The Wikimedia community could be, hopefully should be, the digital volunteers that you might not have thought of, that could come and help you and really reach a larger audience and connect your material in new, interesting ways and do new, cool things with it. So the Audiovisual Archives and the Wikimedia share, I think, the same mission, to make knowledge, for example, in the form of digital cultural heritage and the information and metadata available to as many people as possible. And I think we can really help each other in fulfilling that mission. And I think I really would like to emphasize that the Wikimedia movement is very interested in benefiting from authentic, high-quality audiovisual heritage to illustrate Wikipedia articles. And I think we have just started this journey together, and I'm really looking forward to what's going to come. So thank you so much for listening to me. I'm very happy to take any questions you might have. And if you have specific questions that are more technical or more specific about your institutions, please drop me an email and we can take it from there, see what we can plan together. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you for this lovely presentation and lots of information how to use Wikimedia in the future. But I wanted to come back to the very one of first of your sentences, speaking of the potential of Wikimedia. Does that mean that you think, or you keep Wikimedia as a kind of a growing child, not in its maturity level, or it's a kind of shift that you are facing? If it's a shift, what causes that?
Well, there's been amazing progress over the years with how Wikipedia has grown, how the Wikimedia project has grown. I would still say that we are very much in its infancy. We are, a young child, if you're generous. We have reached some age. We've been coming on 20 years here as a platform, but there's an enormous amount of content that is missing. Both we see the Wikimedia platforms has the potential of really become like infrastructure for how you can share your information from different institutions. We have all the technical capabilities in the organization. We have this enormous amount of volunteers that are interested in cultural heritage, that want to work on it. We have the server infrastructure to host billions of visits per month, and this kind of stuff is missing for a large part of the cultural heritage institutions. They do not have the funds and the know-how on how to build that kind of those kind of solutions themselves, and we view the possibility here that we can help with that, and because we have this interest of sharing all the world's information to all of the world, and that's a very grand goal, but we know we cannot do it ourselves. So, and as more and more people, Harry was pointing to it, that it's being more and more data generated every day. More and more institutions are digitizing their collections, so there's an endless amount of information that we would like to add to the collections that we have online, and to integrate that more and more. I really look at it, we have just got started, and I think we have a lot of work, especially when it comes to audiovisual heritage, to really bring it forward. As I shown in in my slide deck, that the amount of narrative locations for movies, you saw how few red dots there was on the map. There is so much more to do there.
During the years of Wikimedia's infancy, do you already have experience working with formal or non-formal educators? What kind of experience is that? Do you get any feedback, partnerships? Do you develop any partnerships? What do you learn from it? It would be really interesting to hear.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's been one of the success stories of the Wikimedia movement, that we have identified that there is many organizations across the world that they share the vision that we have, and the educational sector is obviously one of them, that they want to share as much information to as many people as possible. So we have really worked since, at least 15 years with education institutions in a very active way. In nearly every country where there's a Wikimedia organization, there's projects around this. That could be and take different shapes, of course, but it's about teaching the kids or the students on how to use Wikipedia. What can you trust? What should you trust? How should you critically evaluate the content? Use source criticism on the platforms. What is it good for? What is not good for? But it's also we've seen that it's been quite efficient to work to really get the kids and the students to understand what the limitations and the benefits are with Wikimedia platforms. We work with them to actually create content, that they are co-producers of the content, so that you have an educator that is very, have seen the potential of Wikimedia, and we work with them to teach we train the trainers, we train the teachers on how they can work on the Wikimedia platforms and what kind of tasks are suitable for the students. They, in their courses, they integrate then a Wikipedia writing assignment, for example, or a photo assignment for Wikimedia Commons. And their students then help actively to create content in that area. They interact then with the Wikimedia community volunteers that might or might not know that they are students, and you give them feedback and this kind of peer review that's always happening on Wikipedia. So that helps them experience what it is to, how the content is being created, which I think really makes them understand what's the potentials and the downsides of an open platform like Wikimedia is. So it's a very active approach to that.
Okay, thank you. Another question is, other than educators, what are other target groups that you aim to reach within some specific timeline? I would also like to ask you to share amounts, numbers, or scale or scopes that you are heading to in a certain timeline, if you have those numbers.
Yeah, okay, sure. So I think we have worked very actively with the GLAM community, the galleries, libraries, archives, and museums over the years, because it's it's kind of a low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of insights in this community about the values of digitization, about the value of sharing content online, that have a same vision of educating the general public. So that was kind of a low-hanging fruit. We have also continuously expanded our work with the public sector, so governmental agencies and departments that have data, often very large amount of data that not always, but quite often is relevant to include on the Wikimedia platforms. So for example, when it comes to open data, if you have official data that is being shared, working with them to upload all or parts of that data onto the Wikidata so they can be used onto the Wikimedia platforms. That is I would say a very strong trend that more and more work is happening around that area. From Wikimedia Sweden perspective, we started working quite heavily the last couple of years with the UN agencies, but we also see a large overlap. So we had a very good partnership with UNESCO for a few years, for 4 years now, I think, because they have been kind of the forerunner when it comes to UN agencies, opening up their content and sharing it. They've been kind of trailblazing it. But we have started the UNFPA is starting to work with us. World Health Organization just initiated a partnership, and so on, because we want to share content that is that they have, the reports that they produce that maybe not so many people read usually. If we can integrate them in a good way onto the Wikimedia platforms, that information that's high quality get a lot of visibility, and we get much better content, obviously. So, for example, I think we had a very interesting partnership with the UNFPA, that's the United Nations Population Fund, on how they have a lot of information on how COVID-19 has affected minorities and vulnerable part of the population, women and minorities, so that they wanted to share that information and get that out there. We created a task force around that with volunteers and Wikimedia organizations and the UNFPA staff, and worked on how we could integrate that effectively and efficiently in the high speed that you need during a crisis like this. So that was quite an exciting partnership to start on. And the second part of the question was how many of these type of partnerships we have. Was that correct?
How many people do you intend to reach in a certain timeline? Probably that was the question.
So how much we're hoping to grow the amount of readers?
Yes.
Well, we don't really have a set timeline like that. That we have, in a certain timeline we have to reach 1.5 billion or something like that. Since we're not kind of what we are trying to really do over the years have been to deepen our capabilities on delivering content in a good way through mobile phones, through smartphones. And I think there's still work to do there, but I think we've reached really far there, and we have really gained traction there. So there's a really strong ongoing discussion now in the Wikimedia community on how we can reach further across the world, because we've seen like in Europe, for example, or US, we have nearly we have an extremely high uptake. So in Sweden, for example, 86% of everybody that's online uses Wikipedia regularly. So I mean, there's not that much room to grow for us anymore in Sweden, but we see in other countries like Nigeria, for example, there is a very small percentage that knows about Wikipedia, that even have heard about it, but now are coming online in very large numbers. I mean, millions and millions of people per year in Nigeria, for example, and they are finding Wikipedia, but they might not find as much information in their mother tongue, in their local languages, that they should to really find it useful. So we are really like reallocating a lot of resources across the world for these local Wikimedia affiliates in parts of the world where we haven't had that much reach before, so that we can spearhead and improve the quality and the amount of content that is available, so people really can find it useful. And partnerships, again, is a key factor to that. And I think it's very interesting in European archives and museums and libraries, we have content collected because of the colonial history we have in Europe from across the world. So we have an obligation, I think, to share that, bring that content on, digitize it, bring it online, and share it with the world so they can reuse that efficiently in their work, and then gain access to it.
Thank you. What is your company policy or a policy of this specific region? We are talking here with the Swedish department, if I can say so, with the sensitive issues like gender equality, like human rights and other sensitive questions. How are you dealing with the content, and what is the policy?
Yeah, so that's a very complex question. First of all, we're not a company; we're a charity, so we don't sell anything. But what we're trying to do with this, we have seen a big problem that we have in the Wikimedia movement has been that we have a very the contributors on Wikipedia they are heavily skewed towards being male and university educated in their 40s. So we have around, we see the data we have, which is very limited because we're going to collect data about the users, but we do surveys. And from the surveys we see that it's about 80 to 90% of the editors that are active are men. So there is a huge gender gap there that we find to be very problematic. And because we're missing out a lot of knowledge and insights and perspective, and frankly, a lot of people that we need to volunteer on the platform. So we have had a lot of activities over the years to engage more women to be editors, more women experts to be editors, and also to bring more content about, for example, biographies about women onto the platforms. Because we see that there's we're missing large chunks there, a large amount of information that we know is missing. So we have had a lot of projects across the world around this. And from Wikimedia Sweden, we work with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for 3 years now. So at Swedish embassies across the world, there's been editathons where we have had partnered with local organizations like universities, for example, and feminist organizations, and the local Wikimedia volunteers. And at the embassy, they've gathered to have what we call an editathon, which is where you come into a room, you have your computers with you, and you edit together in a specific topic. And we focused then on female biographies. And this has been extremely successful. We had it in 54 countries last year. And it was, many thousands of articles being created by hundreds of people, or even thousands of people participating across the world. So that's, it's one example of a project, but there's plenty of these that's ongoing happen. When it comes to maybe the more deeper question, how do we make sure content is racist content, for example, is not highly visible on the platforms? That's a very complex question, and what we have tried to experiment when we come across that type of content in partnerships is to highlight that this is the original metadata. For example, that if we have a collection where they are using terminology from the 20s and 30s that are quite offensive to a modern person, to still include that, but clearly highlight that this is the historical documentation that we had of this object. This is not, and then the adding with the work of the institution we're working with, the kind of like new modernized version of it, not using that kind of negative or like problematic terminology. So that's how I tried to approach it so far. It's not a perfect solution, but it's an ongoing discussion how we best can do that.
Thank you very much. And the last question is, it's really simple. Could you share with us the trends of search engine on Wikimedia? What are the trends in our region, for instance?
Well, I don't have it for the region as much as the trend everywhere goes very much straight up.
Okay, that goes.
We have had a very large increase, over the years. So, and especially as I said, now when we have more, a more mobile-friendly website, that's been, it's been developed for 5, 6, 7 years now. So it's not like it's new, but it's been constantly improving, and people have more of an uptake of it. We see people using it more frequently, and it's more frequent use, and it's more people using it. When I gave these kind of presentations 2 years ago, I talked about 500 million people coming every month and using it. Now I'm talking about 1 billion. So it's a doubling in a couple of years.
Thank you very much. I hope you had a lovely time here with us, and we were not too tiring conference in here. This was John Anderson, the Executive Director of Wikimedia Sweden, and that was kind of the end of the session, containing 2 big platforms and representatives from them, the keynote speakers. We will continue with the coffee break, and we are really sorry not to offer you the real scent and sense of and smell of coffee and cookies. We kindly ask you to add this from your own resources to what we want to offer you together with our partner, national broadcaster, Lithuanian Radio and Television, some pieces from audiovisual archives of a national broadcaster. Please enjoy them during the coffee break, and we will meet on our second part of the session at 11:20, or it would be 20 minutes after midday on Central European time, if you are somewhere in Europe or in the world. Other than that, I want to thank you again, to thank all of our speakers from the session before break, and encourage you all to think of questions, themes, and topics that could be risen up for future speakers and panel discussion, which is upcoming after the break. Please enjoy and come back to our Audiovisual Heritage and its Potential conference.
Dėmesio, kalba Vilnius. Vнимание, говорит Vilnius. Labą rytą, draugai, pradedame mūsų programą. С добрым утром, товарищи! Начинаем нашу передачу.
Доброе утро встречает город, пробуждается для новых работ и труда. Iš Vilniaus į Lendvarį atvažiavo radijo brigada.
Apie tai gyventojai jau iš anksto žinojo, nes gegužės 7-ąją čia turėjo būti įvestas radio taškas. Jų paskolintos valstybei lėšos grįžta jiems patiems. Jungiamas paskutinis kontaktas. Šiandien garso operatorius įrašys naują moterų kvarteto programą.
Jisai neliūdės, kad šliauks ir kaltosis, dainuos iš širdies ir šauks išsijuosis, bet jeigu reikės, jis taps narsuoliu kaip gavrošo. Vilioti mane, iš miesto neverta, greičiau tau pavyks Paryžių į banką sužarti.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the conference Audiovisual Heritage and its Potential. This conference is being held at Martynas Mažvydas National Library of Lithuania. We are sitting here and we are going to give you way much more content that we have during the first part of the session this morning. I hope you enjoyed your coffee break. Just a short reminder for those who joined us now, we had welcome speeches and two keynote speakers coming from Wikimedia and Europeana Foundation. we've gone wide, worldwide, and now we are going to come back to Lithuania, but with a really interesting research and presentation of the research which was necessary, which is still necessary to co-create new ways of dealing with audiovisual heritage in Lithuania, both on policy-making platforms, also dealing with stakeholders and interdisciplinary and inter-institutional partnership ways. So here I want to present you Ms. Lina Kaminskaitė-Jančorienė. As you know, probably NGOs are other sectors who could react and act really quickly, sometimes quicker than public entities and national governmental organizations. So NGO Meno Avilys is the one that Lina represents here, and we are going to hear interesting results of the study on the safeguarding and dissemination of the audiovisual heritage in Lithuania. I hope this would be a good base, a great base for further development of this sector. Ms. Lina is with us. Hello, the word to you.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Brilliant. So thank you so much for having me here, and of course organizers, the Ministry of Culture of Lithuania, for the event and the possibility to present the most recent findings of the research on the condition of audiovisual heritage in Lithuania. And my presentation comparing to previous ones will be few step backs, because I will be more concentrated and focused on classical formats of audiovisual heritage. And now I will share my presentation with you. I will try to share screen. Okay. And here we go. So as the research has not been concluded yet, today I will be presenting only part of the research results. So if you would have any insights, comments on what you hear, I would be very grateful for your feedback, and I promise to improve the research according to them. The research has been commissioned by the Ministry of Culture and is being carried out by the Education and Research Center, Media Education and Research Center, the non-governmental organization Meno Avilys. Regarding my own background, I'm a professionally trained historian. I defended the dissertation of the history of Soviet cinema, and in this non-governmental organization, I'm in charge of film and media research projects, including this one. This research is being evaluated together with my colleague Karolis Žukas, and I hope he's online with us and participating in distance. Moreover, I would like to express my sincerest gratitude to Juozas Markauskas, whose insights and experience has helped us improve the research very much. So thank you so much, Juozas. Alongside the practical work in Meno Avilys, I'm also engaged in academic activities in the Lithuanian Academy of Music and Theatre, where I hold the position of an associate professor. So my practical and academic experiences a little bit reflects, can be seen in this research, because I think it's important to combine that different approaches. So, who we are, who is Meno Avilys, and what do we have in common with the research and audiovisual heritage? This non-governmental organization has been functioning in the sphere of film and media since 2006. Apart from film and media production education, we are also actively involved in the fields of cinema and audiovisual media activities such as dissemination and research. And here are some examples of our activities. So in 2007, together with partners and Ministry of Culture and Central Archives, we arranged an international conference, The Aspects of Lithuanian Cinema Policy, Heritage and Education, during which various issues related to the formation of the cinema heritage policy and the respective solutions were discussed. In 2012, we were the first ones in Lithuania and Baltic countries to initiate the digitization and restoration of Lithuanian cinema heritage. The process was noted and evaluated not only at national, but also at international levels. And we had huge honor to be presented in one of the oldest archival film festivals in Cinema Ritrovata. And Lithuanians were the first ones from Baltic countries to present their own program. And here the project partners and restorers took part in the training sessions organized by the World Film Foundation. And since then have been sharing their experiences successfully with the public sector, Lithuanian Central State Archives, and Lithuanian Film Centers. So we also have the experiences in cooperation with public sector. And in 2016, we started a new project with educational institutions and digitalized and restored video art in VHS format. And our last project was on gender equality in the film industry. And it was, again, the first project, not only in Lithuania, but in Baltic countries. Also, we have some digital content like restored films and art films, video art production, and also curated programs. We have website who's Cinemateca, who's quite a good possibility and opportunity to present national film heritage on international scale. So enough of promotion, and just wanted to say that really it's for us important, this research, as we see it as possibility and opportunity to further broaden our experience in the sphere of audiovisual heritage and strengthen our cooperation with public institutions. So we are very grateful for Ministry of Culture for this opportunity. So let's move to the research. The main aim of the research is based on the collected data about the scope of audiovisual heritage in Lithuania, its preservation condition and access to it. To do this, we have employed very simple methods, like together with the Ministry of Culture, we identified potential institutions where audiovisual heritage could be preserved and conducted a collection assessment in those institutions on the basis of special questionnaire in following directions, and you can see them on the slide. We are interested in the scope and nature of audiovisual heritage in collections and single objects. Also, we are interested in physical condition of audiovisual heritage. What kind of human and financial resources has institutions which has audiovisual content? Also, we are interested in what challenges they face in attempts to preserve audiovisual content. Do they have reproduction and digitization equipment? Can they ensure an access to identified audiovisual heritage? Unlike other Western European countries, Lithuania, unfortunately, does not have a dedicated institution to coordinate preservation of audiovisual heritage. Therefore, we had to draft a certain institutional map. And you can see here, like a small statistical data here, what kind of institutions are involved in this research. So as you can see, such memory institutions traditionally accumulating material, documents and objects as archives, libraries and museums were selected. Regarding the libraries, we chose the National Library and the regional libraries under the authority of which other institutions operate. Speaking of the selected museums, national, private and municipal museums were included in the research. Research also involves not only those memory institutions traditionally storing old material, but also various organizations which are documenting performing arts, for instance, theaters, storing moving image recordings of their performances, concert institutions storing sound recordings of musical performances, and so on. Also, we included private television channels, educational institutions, cultural information centers, and non-governmental organizations. Not only the municipal authorities of the main cities, in Lithuania we have 3 main cities, Vilnius, Kaunas, and Klaipėda, but also more remotely situated municipalities were involved in the research. So in this graph, you can see data on how much national, institutional, and regional institutions. It's a small part, but still we divided it. An even deeper cross-section was made by selecting the case study of Tauragė region. In other words, the research seeks to encompass institutions of different subordination and dependence with the aim to have better picture of the status of audiovisual heritage, despite belonging to one institution. The basis of the research is formed following. I know that mostly everybody knows this publication, but still I would like it to quote and to show you. Formed following UNESCO publication Audiovisual Archiving, Philosophy and Principles, we used and adapted the notion of audiovisual heritage provided in this publication, also which suggests that audiovisual heritage could be identified as recorded sound, radio, film, television, video, digital, or other productions comprising moving images and all recorded sounds, whether or not primarily intended for distribution to the public. Objects, materials, works, and intangibles relating to audiovisual documents, whether seen from a technical, industrial, cultural, historical, or other viewpoint. This shall include material relating to the film, broadcasting, air recording industries such as literature, scripts, stills, posters, advertising materials, manuscripts, and artifacts such as technical equipment or costumes. Concepts such as the perpetuation of obsolescence skills and environments associated with the reproduction and presentation of these media. Non-literary or graphical materials such as photographs, maps, manuscripts, slides, and other visual works selected in their own right. So in our research, we chose to exclude only photography due to the research limitation, and also due to the local cultural context in which photography is clearly identified as a visual document, and it has good protection, it has less challenges in its preservation politics than another audiovisual forms. Yes, so here you can see the types we identified as audiovisual heritage. It's in cinematic heritage, and it has its own types, television heritage with own types, other type of moving images, and sound heritage. So I will focus on each of them. Okay. As might be expected, as one of the spheres of audiovisual heritage, cinema has received greatest attention, as it is historically and culturally most clearly defined audiovisual field in Lithuania. When defining cinematographic heritage, we relied on the understanding, I personally rely on understanding of works produced by professional filmmakers. Here you can see that cinematic heritage is divided in different groups. Film collections, and above you can see the institutions in which those types of cinematic heritage is preserved. Film collections, additional material, cinema recording and screening equipment, the craft of film projectionist, and film screening experience. So those types are divided according to the UNESCO suggested notion I mentioned before. A little bit comment on film collections and institutions. So the biggest institutions which preserves films are three main archives. It's Lithuanian Central State Archives. It preserves and films made during national films made in interwar period and Soviet period and independent period. Also Lithuanian National Radio and Television. We have Lietuvos kinas, Lithuanian cinema. It's very interesting archive. I will focus more on it. And other institutions like Lithuanian Film Central, Lithuanian Filmmaking Union, Meno Vilys are institutions which preserves digitalized content or copies of films. And the last one is small library which preserves the films of avant-garde filmmaker Jonas Mekas. So it's more focused collection on personal artistic craftsmen. So the most problematic case in this segment, in this film collection segment, is the case of Lithuanian Kinas archive. You can see it, the third one, or Lithuanian cinema, which preserves the collection of particularly great, not national, but international value. It's former distribution institution for entire Lithuania. So it preserved distributed films starting from late 50s until 2000. And because of its international values, this collection is currently under threat. And I believe that my colleague Vaida from this archive will present issue more specific. I just will say that the collection is related not only with artistic values, but also with historical, technological, cultural ones, censorship, colonization process, film circulation history, and so on. And unfortunately, such values are not observed when evaluating the potential as well as preservation possibilities of this collection. So the fate of the collection remains uncertain. Also, it's worth noting that the concept of cinema is extensive in most of institutions, and it's good. And I think it's helped some improved new documents and because of initiative of Lithuanian Film Center. So not only documents of moving image and films, so not only films are stored and preserved, but also the material related with their distribution production process. Posters, leaflets, photos from film sets, costume sketches. And it's kind of, when we are thinking about cinematic heritage, it's kind of big steps forward, and it's good thing, and it's kind of improvement in understanding what is cinema heritage. Also, film production and screening equipment is preserved. But that kind of technical equipment is traditionally regarded as part of technological rather than audiovisual heritage. Also, it is important to notice that some institutions, if I may say so, preserves the skills of showing analog films so the craftsmen of projectionists and Lithuanian cinema, Lietuvos kinas, that the third biggest film archive in Lithuania. It has, special projection rooms and person who showed films from, late, early Soviet period until today. And it's the only and the last place for archival films to show in Vilnius and Lithuania. And also we have very interesting case in Šiauliai. In Šiauliai, there is reconstruction of cinema of interwar period. So Šiauliai preserves and shares experience of disappeared screening experience. And those two cases represent perfect modern notion of audiovisual heritage, which is suggested by UNESCO. Okay, so now let's move to, also it's it's photo from small museum in Smalininkai. So here you can see this museum is really very interesting because, 300 away from Vilnius or 200 away from other big cities, there is private museum established by a very interesting man who preserves projection system and cinema equipment. And he has brilliant collection, and that museum is private, and you can see here photo of that small museum. So other not cinematographical heritage, but television heritage, which I would like to mention separate, is television heritage, which can be divided in two categories: television production as films, programs, TV shows, and other TV production formats, and also television transmission recording equipment. Television moving image production show films programs are preserved and following in institutions, which were included in our research. And again, as one can guess, the best situation is in Lithuania National Radio and Television, our national broadcaster, the oldest state television, where the television products created during the Soviet and independent periods are preserved, when we have two cases of commercial televisions. And the situation is especially complicated with commercial television channels. Historically, commercial television is a relatively new phenomenon in Lithuania. Such television channels started emerging only during the collapse of Soviet Union, after Lithuania regained its independence. Therefore, they are related not only with the history of independent statehood, but also with changing media formats like magnetic tape, VHS, and digital formats. Commercial television channels tend to archive their content how it's possible, how they can. For example, LNK and BTV, commercial television channels operating since 1995, they have their archive, their storage rooms, they digitalize their content. Whereas TV3, like one of the oldest commercial television in Lithuania, unfortunately, destroyed its entire archive, preserved in VHS format only 10 years ago. So the same could happen with commercial radio stations, because no one controls or no one cooperates in attempts to preserve that commercial-based content. Yet we also have good cases to be happy about. For instance, most of television products in Tauragė region, where the first independent television channel in Lithuania was founded, have been preserved. And what is more, the commercial television, here you can see photo, the owner and his small archive of local television, commercial television channel that continued the activities of the region television has also kept its archive since its establishment. Another equally important and interesting case is with the city of Šiauliai, where radio and television equipment and broadcasting devices are preserved. What does this say? That it can be seen from these several brilliant examples that television, regional television, plays a special role not only in urban, but also in regional culture, in regional historical identity. Okay. So the last type of moving image type or group is other type of moving images. And we here have, I divided in several groups like amateur films, moving images of artistic performances, moving images of the activities of institutions, at moving images of ethnographical origins. So this group is of moving images traditionally attributed to audiovisual heritage, but unrelated to cinematographic and television objects. As the most recent research suggests, amateur films constitute a unique audiovisual heritage group in the post-Soviet region. Those are significant, unique documents of especially great importance to the regions that captured the Soviet everyday life. If we compare them with the Western experiences, those are not homemade movies, but rather the films produced by certain groups of people constituting local, non-professional film studios. In the Soviet Union, the latter phenomena is also known as amateur film clubs and was initiated as type of leisure activities by the governing authorities back in 1950s and continued until the collapse of the Soviet Union. First, there are a lot of amateur films in the regions, and I myself had a pleasant experience of expert cooperation with Lithuanian UNESCO department when in 2014, here you can see some photos, we included the films produced by one amateur group from Kėdainiai. Those two guys still runs that amateur film studio. In the documentary Heritage of National Significance, we included them in the Lithuanian National Register under the UNESCO's Memory of the World program. That kind of studio, small, the archives kept in personal archives, personal level, are a lot of in Lithuania. But the most problematic type of audiovisual heritage in this group are moving images of artistic performances, drama plays, dances, concerts, which usually is preserved in temporal VHS format, and the future of that kind of documents with exceptional value is very unclear also. Okay, so let's move to the last group, sound heritage. So this last but not least group of identified audiovisual heritage is sound recordings, which could be divided in those groups: radio, music recordings, sound recordings of artistic activities, ethnographic culture, and also equipment. So the biggest holders of sound heritage are Lithuanian National Radio and Television, Central State Archives, and what was surprising also when we are thinking about radio, Kaunas County Public Library. When we are thinking about music recordings, so here's the leader, the main leader, National Library of Lithuania. So it's worth to mention that in preserving sound recordings dominates libraries and education institutions. The biggest challenge for sound heritage preservers is the storage space for original magnetic tapes. Most of them would love to give those tapes to public institutions, archives, but there is some struggle in this process. And I see that my time is running out, so I would like to summarize the analysis of this empirical data. And the analysis of that empirical data shows some problems and problematic areas which can be singled out on several different levels. So audiovisual notion, what does it mean? The problem is that sometimes institution doesn't understand what is audiovisual heritage and what kind of objects they identify as part of audiovisual heritage. Another problem is on the level of infrastructure and competence. The third level of problem is legislation, and the fourth problem is on the level of regional policy. So on the level of the notion of audiovisual heritage, there can be seen a lack of audiovisual heritage concept and interpretation of its values. Usually, audiovisual heritage collections in museums and libraries are not recognized as specific collections. Audiovisual objects are scattered over various collections, or often an outdated concept of audiovisual heritage is employed, concentrating on past productions, but ignoring the present time and the future. So we're still not understanding, we're still not able to adapt audiovisual heritage concept to documents or heritage which was produced in past. So how we can, think about present time or future? Vague selection of criteria for preservation and changing values for heritage, As research shows, it is not clear why Central State Archives focuses only on historical value of documents, leaving behind other ones like artistic value and applying that approach on musical recorders, but not cinema. So, the different approach of values on different types of audiovisual heritage. Today, on international scale, there is big discussion on decolonizing process and applying it on archives, decolonizing archives. In Lithuania, there is need also of some shift in approach towards Soviet heritage, because we still neglect our past, especially Soviet's past, and this attitude affects our notion on the value of audiovisual heritage. I mean, the case of Lietuvos kinas, Lithuanian cinema, of international collection and former Soviet countries, its importance for former Soviet countries. So on the level of infrastructure and competence, we can see a lack of spacious repositories suitable for the storage of different type of audiovisual heritage. So there is lack of, everything. Films, music, sound recordings. And, as an example, I can show you photography of in what kind of conditions films preserved at Lithuanian National and Television Archive. It's films made in Lithuanian Film Studio, and the piece of collection is in Central State Archive, and another piece of collection is in Television Archive. And archive does brilliant work, and it preserves. It doesn't, throws them away, but there is need of storage rooms, and there is need good conditions for that kind of audiovisual heritage. And that condition is in Vilnius. It's in like the biggest and central city in Lithuania. So what we can expect for other cities? Institutions often focus only on their own interests. They have no ambition to see broader picture, aiming to solve systematic problems, and rather join professional networks abroad or join international projects. There is lack of cooperation between public and private commercial sectors. Institutions which preserves audiovisual heritage feel big needs in growing, in improving skills, competence. They lack human resources to perform cataloging, restoration, and digitization, and everything holds on, personal initiative. On the level of legislation, state archives do not promote volunteer legal deposit. Legal deposit is applied only to those cinematographic productions that are state funded. However, commercial products, television, and other audiovisual documents, more contemporary media like digital products or computer games, do not fall under this category. The lack of proper legislation enabling suitable background for national audiovisual preservation strategy and funding. So the last thing, aiming to preserve and not to lose audiovisual heritage in remote areas, it is extremely important to support initiatives in regions. Aiming to strengthen regional identity and to act more on collaboration level, it is important to give opportunity for regional institutions like local archives, museums to preserve audiovisual heritage and to support them in evaluating infrastructure for preservation and digitization. And finally, as international experiences shows, there are different ways and different governing models in solving problems of audiovisual heritage in preservation and other aspects. But unfortunately, as our research shows in Lithuania, there is no even small basis or origins of something similar to that kind of system or model. So I think the first step would be to establish such one, to make system, to make model, with expertise of international colleagues. And I sincerely hope that this research which will contribute to those first steps and attempts. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I really wish we could hear some applause here, but I'm sitting in front of the empty audience. Unfortunately, thank you, Lina. You have done a great job. A big data is collected and understood and presented to us. My question is, behind those steps, above those steps, what is your vision? What would be your wish for Lithuanian governance on audiovisual heritage preservation? What would be the model itself, like in the end? What should it be in the end, if you could dream on? I mean, we go further.
I think, if I could dream on, so I think it would be great to combine several models. Like we have more in Switzerland, like the association or union of audiovisual institutions with supervision of like France has or Finland has, with supervision of Audiovisual Institute, the institution which makes politics, provides workshops, solves problems, evaluates systems, or divides where should go new findings of audiovisual heritage, or helps regions, and also thinks about now and about future, and cooperates with private and commercial sector, because as you could see, there are so much problems, and we are really very, we should, and to solve those problems, we have to have, I don't know, maybe decade, or really good and strong political will in wishing to solve those problems, because audiovisual heritage is very fragile heritage, and it's very depends on new media formats. We are not able to, capable to preserve the media products or audiovisual heritage made in past. So how we can think about, future when we have no system? And I think that institution which is independent enough, but which sees broader picture of the problem could be solution, but I don't know if it's possible.
Do you see such institution in Lithuania right now capable of reaching such competences, or maybe having a potential to become one, or should it be the newly established institution for audiovisual heritage?
I think newly established, because we had all the institutions for our entire 3 decades, but no one took ambition and initiative to solve those problems. And as I said in my research, and research as shows that, mostly institutions, archives, museums, they are more interested in their own held heritage, but not in other ones, institutions. So it should be someone, a little bit step higher, which could help to coordinate all the huge and to initiate a collaboration, not some strength within that within those institutions, or to put on the agenda collaboration.
Thank you, Lina. I wanted to mention that a decade that you have mentioned in your answer, in your previous answer, a decade is not a long time in policymaking, but it could be as well a long time or too long for a fragile audiovisual heritage preservation, of course. So I wish the best, all this best new institution to Lithuania. And as our time is running out, I still got one question from the audience, which was put on the, I think, on the Zoom platform. I will announce it now. Where can we find Lithuanian diaspora audiovisual heritage, TV show, radio and film movement, except Jonas Mekas collection in Lithuania? That was the question.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. Diaspora films are preserved in, in different archives and libraries. For example, in the early moving image documents are like made in the beginning of 20th century are preserved in Central State Archives. Also in Kaunas library, there are recordings. Also if we are thinking about sound recordings, also in national libraries. So there are some.
Lina, do you see international collaborations even between policymakers or private entities as a crucial thing for audiovisual heritage? Or is it important, less important, essential? What do you see?
I think it's crucial because, our international colleagues has brilliant experience and we just need a little bit help. And I think if there is will, so everything is possible to solve. So in the first steps, the international collaboration, it will be crucial.
Thank you very much. This was Dr. Lina Kaminskaitė-Jančorienė presenting the results of the study of safeguarding and dissemination of the audiovisual heritage in Lithuania. Thank you very much. Have a great time researching and working on this field. And I want to thank all of you which have been watching our conference, following up topics and speakers. We will come back with even more because we have this wide heritage, audiovisual heritage window opened. This window will present hopefully not too much sunlight for you, but about enough. So we have opened the international content as well as Lithuanian context to you. And we are going to come back after a lunch break at 1 o'clock Vilnius or Eastern European time. It will be 2 o'clock in Central Europe at the time. So in 1 hour, we are going to go back and have a panel discussion with even more experienced people from the region. I thank you all again. Please come back. This is audiovisual heritage and its potential on the way. Thank you.